In the current leadership campaign for the Prime Minister's position, there are three major contenders. Realistically, only three. You have Sajid Javid, the current Home Secretary, who took over from Amber Rudd, who lied to Parliament, who lost her job, and then now is currently Work and Pensions Secretary. How appropriate. A person who lied about the Windrush generation is now in charge of the older people, many of whom were a part of the Windrush generation. So you have Sajid Javid, Boris Johnson, who many like because of how funny he is. Whether it be intentional or not, he is witty. As Mayor of London, he did quite well. I'm sure many will say, yes, but this. No, he still did quite well, to the point where the bikes that weren't even his original policy, they were Ken Livingstone's, are named after him. The Boris bike, because that man uses bikes everywhere around London. He's renowned for it. His policies are a bit more extreme by comparison to Sajid Javid, especially when you consider he voted and campaigned for leave, as we discussed in the last video on this channel. The final contender has had some fresh controversy, and it's interesting to note that this man also has a history with Boris Johnson. I should now outright say, yes, Esther McVey, Andrea Leadsom and Penny Mordaunt are currently also jockeying for the position of Prime Minister, but all three of them have been remarkably quiet. Yes, perhaps the media have focused on these three, and they haven't given women the fair crack, but I also believe their lack of vocalness when it comes to policies they intend to push is also hampering their success in convincing members of the Conservative Party to vote for them. The third is the Sneck, Michael Gove. His history with Boris Johnson is renowned. The most recent and well-known piece is the fact that Michael Gove actually stabbed Boris Johnson in the back when he originally went for the leader position after the referendum, which actually ended up costing Michael Gove as well. Michael Gove is also featured in the news because he admitted, and has since regretted, that he took cocaine in his 20s, which would explain a lot, I guess. But honestly, I don't care. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone that hasn't done something that they regret, or taken something that they regret. I myself regret pounding an entire bottle of milk and magnesia after my 21st birthday. Turns out, it doesn't help, and it just came back up again. I mean, come on, I needed a doctor after that. Michael Gove, in an attempt to appease many people, has actually come up with an idea, one that I think is quite thought-provoking, in that he has promised, that he will scrap VAT should he be elected Prime Minister, which is quite a huge deal. VAT, for those who don't know, is value-added tax, which is 20% of the original product's price. To be honest, most people don't particularly care about it. It used to be 17.5%, now it's 20%. I guess to an extent, it's a way of slightly increasing the cost of living, but nobody really cares. Remember, everything but what you breathe is taxable. I'm sure given time we'll be taxed on breathing as well. But back to Mr. Gove's idea. He believes because of his understanding of business, he has been able to make education a success. He believes by alleviating the value-added tax, it would stop holding businesses back. He would cut reform taxes, which include business rates, which in turn also put pressure on small businesses like value-added tax. And that would make people and encourage people to be more active on the high street. I'm not entirely sure that's going to work out, because many would point out online shopping currently trounces the high street. If you lower business rates and VAT, it just makes online things cheaper anyway. So how does the high street compete with that? And the short answer is, they can't. They have to adapt. But when you give it some consideration, you realise he is positing this idea as a means to encourage businesses to be more active once we leave the EU. He himself being a Brexiteer, he is one of the three that many would say is moderate when it comes to handling Brexit. He himself supporting the Prime Minister's deal because he's a Sneck. I would also point out he's a massive hypocrite because back in the 90s he wrote an article denouncing people who took cocaine or taking drugs. I believe he called those that did middle-class professionals, which is, as we all know, quite amusing in hindsight that the Sneck got done by himself. Sneck eating his own tail, perhaps? Meh, who cares? In this campaign, there are those who are vocally in favour of each individual challenger. The most notable name throwing their name behind Sajid Javid being Ruth Davidson, the Conservative Scottish leader, many of whom actually think Ruth Davidson could in fact be Prime Minister of this country, or First Minister for Scotland, which I think would be interesting, considering how much the SNP dominate Scottish politics. So to see a Conservative leader up there would be quite interesting, because usually when it comes to attacking politicians, they attack identity, but Ruth, being a part of the LGBT community, is somewhat immune to it, which I find fascinating. Anyway, with Michael Gove's recent revelations being a sneck and proposed policy on VAT, I'd very much like to know what you think, whether or not this could swing the votes in his favour, because he hasn't really explained this much. It is a tad nebulous. Or if you think he won't win and will summarily be sent to the backbenches by Johnson, or used as an ally by, say, Sajid Javid. And if it isn't an obvious enough indicator, yes, I don't think Rory Stewart or Jeremy Hunt are going to win. Although I do think it'd be quite amusing to have Jeremy Hunt there, somebody with the single most punchable face in politics.